Max Tanner had always felt like the punchline of a joke he didn't quite get. But nothing in his late-night grind through dingy comedy clubs had prepared him for the man, or rather, the nightmare that now stepped out of the shadows like a twisted punchline come to life. The corridor behind the club was narrow and filthy, plaster peeling from the walls as if the building itself was trying to laugh off the decay. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting uneven patches of light and shadow that danced like specters. Max's heart thudded in his chest, the cursed joke book heavy in his coat pocket. He'd tried to ignore the creeping dread gnawing at his mind all evening, but the sudden chill in the air told him otherwise. A soft, mocking chuckle echoed from the end of the hall. Max swallowed hard, squinting into the gloom. There, illuminated by a sputtering light, stood the Jester. His costume was a grotesque parody of traditional court jesters, tattered, stained, and hanging in illogical angles that somehow made the figure both comical and horrifying. His face was painted in a grotesque smile, a permanent, sinister grin that stretched impossibly wide, eyes glinting with malevolent mirth. "Ah, Max Tanner," the Jester's voice slithered through the air like smoke. The poor comedian trapped in a punchline too cruel for the world to bear. "Tell me, does the laughter taste bitter when it's your own?" The words twisted around Max's spine like icy fingers. Max tried to respond, but his voice caught in his throat. The Jester took a slow step forward, the jingle of broken bells on his costume echoing softly. "I've come to reclaim what's mine," he said, producing a small, ancient-looking book from the folds of his ragged sleeves, the cursed joke book. Max's mind raced. The book was a lethal weapon disguised as humor, and this man embodied the chaos it wrought. But what was he really? A man, a spirit, a curse made flesh. The Jester's presence seemed to warp reality itself, turning the air thick with absurdity and menace. "You think you can outwit fate with a joke?" The Jester laughed, a sound both joyful and terrifying. "Fate is the ultimate comedian, Max, and it never misses its mark." Before Max could react, footsteps approached. Lila Nguyen appeared, her sharp eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. "Max, we don't have time for theatrics. We need a plan." The Jester's grin widened. "Ah, the loyal sidekick. How delightful. But even your combined wit won't save you from what's coming." Later, in the cramped dressing room, the smell of stale smoke and sweat clung to the air. Max sat hunched over the cursed book, its pages seeming to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. Lila leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her usual smirk replaced by a serious edge. "We need to know more about him," she said. "Who is this Jester? Why is he tied to the book?" Max flipped through the pages, searching for clues. "He's not just a man," Max murmured. "He's the curse itself, the embodiment of the joke's dark heart." Their conversation was interrupted by the muffled roar of the audience gathering outside. Max's next performance was imminent, and the stakes had never been higher. The laughter they would soon unleash carried a deadly weight, and the presence of the Jester made every chuckle a potential death knell. On stage, the spotlight burned bright, illuminating Max's nervous smile. The crowd's laughter was both fuel and poison, an uncontrollable force that fed the cursed jokes. As Max delivered punchline after punchline, a chilling voice cut through the noise, the Jester's taunt echoing from the shadows. "Laugh, Max, laugh. It's the sound of your own undoing." The theater seemed to warp, the boundary between reality and nightmare blurring. Max's mind raced, balancing the absurdity of the situation with the cold logic needed to survive. Every joke was a gamble, every laugh a risk. After the set, the danger was far from over. In the fog-shrouded alley behind the theater, Max found himself cornered by assassins sent by the Jester. Their moves were swift and silent, shadows in human form, but Max's quick wit became his weapon. With a desperate joke uttered just in time, he distracted them long enough to slip away. Breathless, heart-pounding, Max realized the absurdity of his situation was his greatest strength. In a world ruled by the unpredictable hand of the Jester, survival meant embracing chaos with a smile. As dawn approached, Max's resolve hardened. The game was on, and he was no longer just the punchline. He was a contender. But the question lingered: how do you outjoke the embodiment of fate itself? The answer, Max knew, lay somewhere between the dark laughter and the deadly silence that followed. And the show was far from over. The dim glow of the stage lights cast long shadows across the packed comedy club, where Max Tanner stood, clutching the microphone like a lifeline. The crowd was larger than ever tonight, their faces expectant, eager for the next punchline. But tonight was different. The air was thick with a strange energy, a buzz that seemed to hum beneath the usual claps and cheers. Max felt it too, a restless laugh itching just under his skin, threatening to spill out uncontrollably. He started with a joke from the cursed book, the one Harold Finch had nervously recommended he try first. The audience erupted instantly, laughter rolling like waves, some faces lighting with joy, others twisting with something darker. Max's heart hammered as he noticed a man near the back clutching his chest, eyes wide with disbelief before collapsing in a heap. The room faltered, confusion rippling through the crowd, but the laughter didn't stop. It grew louder, more manic. It was as if the joke had cast a spell, binding them all in a feverish grip of hilarity and terror. Backstage, the clutter of props and empty water bottles formed a chaotic backdrop for a tense conversation. Lila Nguyen paced, her stylish jacket slipping off one shoulder as she stopped in front of Max, who was wiping sweat from his brow. "Max, this has to stop," she said, voice low but firm. "You're playing with fire, and it's not just your career on the line anymore." Max met her gaze, the nervous smile he wore like armor faltering. "I know," he admitted, "but the crowds, the attention, it's what I've been chasing. I can't just quit now." Lila's smirk softened, revealing the conflict beneath her pragmatic exterior. "I get it, I do. But at what cost? I'm torn between helping you and not getting burned myself." Meanwhile, miles away in a dim precinct office, Detective Reed hunched over his cluttered desk. Cigarette smoke curled lazily toward the cracked ceiling as he studied photos of the victims, all linked by one bizarre thread: they'd been present at Max's shows. His cynicism, usually a protective shield against the absurdities of his job, was cracking. "What the hell kind of joke kills people?" he muttered, flicking ash into an overflowing tray. The deeper he dug, the more tangled the conspiracy seemed, with whispers of secret cabals and a trickster figure known only as the Jester. Reed couldn't decide if he was chasing a madman or a myth. Back on stage, Max's nerves sparked a wild improvisation. The cursed jokes from the book were unpredictable, sometimes drawing boisterous cheers, other times sending the crowd into dangerous fits of laughter. He danced on the edge, balancing wit and survival, his quick thinking the only shield against the lethal humor. Each punchline was a gamble, each laugh a possible last breath. The line between comedy and catastrophe blurred until Max himself wasn't sure which side he was on. Yet in the chaos was a strange kind of salvation, a dark humor that somehow kept him moving forward. As the night dragged on, the weight of choices bore down on Max and Lila. Could they keep walking this razor's edge, or would one misstep doom them both? Detective Reed's shadow loomed ever closer, threatening to expose secrets better left buried. The crossroads of comedy had never been so treacherous or so absurdly alive. Maybe, Max thought, this is what comedy really is, a dance with fate, with laughter as both sword and shield. And somewhere, in the depths of the night, the Jester watched, his grin growing wider, the game far from over. To be continued. The comedy club buzzed with electricity, an almost tangible static of anticipation that clung to the sticky air like a second skin. Max Tanner adjusted the microphone stand with a shaky hand, eyes flickering to the battered notebook hidden beneath his jacket. Tonight, he was no longer just a struggling comic. Tonight, he was a man tempting fate itself. The cursed joke book, ancient and ominous, had transformed his life into a precarious balancing act between laughter and death. The crowd's murmur swelled as Max took center stage, the neon sign outside casting a surreal, flickering glow that danced across his pale, nervous face. The low hum of conversation was punctuated by the clink of glasses and the occasional cough, but beneath it all, the air thrummed with an unsettling tension. Max swallowed hard. He knew what awaited him beyond the first punchline. An uncontrollable wave of laughter that could topple the strongest constitution. Clearing his throat, Max began. His voice was low but steady, weaving the first harmless jokes into the fabric of the set, gauging the audience's mood. The laughter he elicited was genuine but cautious. Then, with a glance at the open book nestled in his inner pocket, he ventured deeper. Joke after joke spilled from his lips, each darker, sharper, whispers of an absurd world where humor was a weapon. The room transformed. Laughter erupted like a wildfire, rolling through the crowd in a relentless crescendo. Faces contorted, smiles stretching beyond reason, and soon, some patrons doubled over, clutching their sides, tears streaming down cheeks flushed with hilarity. But this was no ordinary comedy night. The curse tightened its grip. A few collapsed breaths shallow, their laughter frozen mid-chuckle. Panic flickered in the eyes of those nearby, yet the contagious humor held them hostage. Backstage, Lila Nugent watched with a mix of fascination and fear. Her ever-present smirk faltered as she saw the chaos unfurl, the surreal blend of joy and horror painting the scene in stark relief. She clenched her fists, torn between admiration for Max's daring and dread for the consequences. Outside, shadows shifted with purpose. Evelyn Cross, the assassin leader, moved like a spectre through the night, her dark attire blending seamlessly with the urban gloom. Behind her, a cadre of silent hunters followed, their eyes cold and unyielding. The deadly laughter inside was the beacon that guided their approach, a signal that the cursed book was in play, and the time to strike was now. Inside, Max's pulse quickened. He sensed the tightening noose of danger, the invisible eyes prying through walls and windows. Recklessness had been his fuel, but now it threatened to consume him. Switching gears, Max abandoned the lethal jokes for agile banter, weaving quick-witted retorts that acted as a shield against despair. His nervous smile sharpened into something almost defiant, a glimmer of the old comic fighting back against the dark fate. The backstage corridors became a labyrinth of shadows and echoes. Max's footsteps pounded like a frantic drumbeat as he dodged through narrow passages, his breath ragged but controlled. The cursed book throbbed in his pocket, both a blessing and a curse, a source of power and peril. Each heartbeat was a gamble, each joke a step closer to oblivion or salvation. As the assassins closed in, the line between humor and horror blurred. Max's wit was his weapon, his laughter a lifeline. But how long could he hold the balance? The night stretched ahead, thick with uncertainty and the promise of deadly punchlines yet to come. The club's neon glow flickered once more, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters across the walls. Max paused, eyes scanning the exit routes, mind racing. Somewhere in the chaos of laughter and lurking danger, the next joke waited, the one that might save him or end him. And so, under the dim lights and the watchful eyes of fate's cruel trickster, Max Tanner prepared to face the night's deadly performance, a show where every laugh could be his last. But in the heart of absurdity, where comedy met catastrophe, Max discovered that sometimes the only way to survive was to laugh in the face of death itself, and maybe, just maybe, outjoke the darkness. The evening air was thick with the kind of anticipation that felt almost electric, buzzing in Max Tanner's veins as he sat alone at his worn kitchen table. The dim light of a single desk lamp cast long shadows across the clutter of notebooks, coffee cups, and the infamous cursed joke book that had rewritten the trajectory of his life. Before him lay an envelope, thick, cream-colored, and embossed with gold lettering that seemed almost too elegant for the rough-and-tumble world Max inhabited. With trembling fingers, he broke the seal and unfolded the heavy card inside. A flourish of formal script invited him to perform at the upcoming prestigious comedy festival, a beacon of hope in his otherwise chaotic existence. His breath caught, heart pounding with a cocktail of exhilaration and dread. This was the break he'd been chasing all his life, the chance to claw his way back into the spotlight. But with the joke book's dark shadows still looming, the stakes had never been higher. The silence of his apartment was suddenly shattered by the distant wail of a siren, a reminder that the city never truly slept, nor did danger. Max's eyes flickered to the worn pages of the book, its ancient leather cover cracked and whispering secrets he hardly wanted to hear. The cursed humor had already claimed lives, twisted fate, and drawn deadly attention. Now, this invitation was both a blessing and a gauntlet thrown at his feet. 2 days later, the clatter of cups and murmur of conversation filled the cozy corner booth of an offbeat cafe where Max met Lila. The air smelled faintly of roasted beans and caramel syrup, but beneath the comforting aroma simmered tension. Lila's sharp gaze locked onto Max's jittery posture as she pushed a steaming cup across the table toward him. "You've got to be careful," she said, voice low but firm, her dry wit barely masking the worry beneath. "This festival isn't just a chance to shine, it's a target painted on your back." Max took a sip, the bitterness grounding him for a moment. "I know, but if I don't try, I'm dead anyway. Or worse, forgotten." Lila's smirk softened into a rare smile. "Then we plan. We get ahead of whatever's coming." Together, they pored over the details, the festival's schedule, the security measures, the potential allies and enemies lurking in the crowd. Every plan was a fragile thread woven into the chaotic tapestry of their lives, each one a gamble against fate's cruel trickster hand. Meanwhile, in the back alleys of the city, Tommy Sparks leaned against the chipped brick wall of his comedy club, the neon sign buzzing erratically above him. A cigarette dangled from his lips, smoke curling into the night as he watched Max approach. "You sure you want to do this?" Tommy asked, voice gravelly but not unkind. "That festival's no joke, Max. It's a whole different beast." Max shrugged, nerves tightening his smile. "I'm out of options. Besides, maybe this time the joke's on fate." Tommy's eyes narrowed, a flicker of concern breaking through his usual skepticism. "Just watch your back. The higher you climb, the harder you fall. Detective Reed's world was a stark contrast. Rain slicked the narrow alley behind the club, the glow of street lamps blurred by the drizzle. His trenchcoat collar was turned up against the chill, cigarette smoke mingling with the damp air. He scanned the shadows, the faint echo of laughter from inside the club haunting him like a ghost. The deaths connected to Max's performances were no coincidence, and Reed's instincts told him the story was far darker and more twisted than a mere coincidence. The cabal behind the Jester was closing in, their influence seeping into every corner of the city's underbelly. Reed's fingers tightened around the cigarette as he muttered to himself, "This isn't just about jokes anymore. It's a war for control." Back in his apartment, Max sat cross-legged on the floor, the invitation still clutched in his hand. The laughter that had once seemed so innocent now echoed with a sinister edge. He knew the festival was a crossroads, a moment where his fate, the curse, and the deadly game he'd been thrust into would collide. Yet beneath the dread, a stubborn ember of hope flickered. Maybe, just maybe, he could turn the punchline around. Outwit the Jester, survive the assassins, and reclaim not only his career but his life. The festival beckoned, and with it, the promise of chaos and salvation intertwined in the strangest joke fate had ever played. As Max prepared to step onto the biggest stage of his life, the city seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if laughter would bring life or death. And somewhere in the shadows, the Jester smiled. Max's fingers trembled as he folded the invitation carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket. The weight of the cursed joke book in his bag was heavier than ever, a constant reminder that the coming days would test every ounce of his wit and courage. "Ready, Lila's?" Voice broke through his reverie as she appeared in the doorway, arms crossed and eyes sharp. He nodded, a nervous grin tugging at his lips. "As ready as I'll ever be." Together, they stepped out into the night, the city lights flickering like 1,000 punchlines waiting to be told, some deadly, some hopeful, all absurdly intertwined. The festival beckoned, and Max Tanner was about to answer its call. The final laugh, however, was still waiting to be told. The night before the festival was a tempest in more ways than one. Rain battered the grimy windows of the comedy club's back room, where Max, Tanner, and Lila Nguyen sat huddled over a stack of brittle yellowed papers and worn-out books Harold Finch had reluctantly provided. The storm outside was a relentless percussion, tapping against the glass like the ticking of a morbid clock, each drop echoing the urgency in Max's mind. So, this Jester guy, he wasn't always the villain. Lila mused, flicking through a fragile page with a carefully gloved hand. Apparently, he was once a celebrated performer, someone who loved laughter as much as we do, but cursed to become this. She gestured vaguely, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows that danced like phantoms on the peeling walls. Max rubbed his temples, a nervous smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Yeah, turns out the guy's story is as twisted as the jokes in that book. It's almost poetic, a tragic clown condemned to be the harbinger of lethal laughter. I guess fate's got a cruel sense of humor." Harold Finch, perched on a rickety stool nearby, nodded sagely. "The curse binds him to the book, and the book to the curse. It's a cycle that feeds on the absurdity of human folly and the dangerous allure of humor. The more you laugh, the closer you dance with death." Max's mind replayed the countless faces he'd seen dissolve into uncontrollable laughter, some ending in terror, others in tragedy. He thought of the upcoming comedy festival, looming like a dark monolith on the horizon, a stage where the stakes were no longer just laughs, but survival. The room's atmosphere thickened as the rain intensified. punctuated by distant thunder that seemed to roar in approval of the grim revelations. Lila leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We need to be ready. The Jester won't just sit idle. He's intertwined with this curse, and he'll come for the book for you." Max shivered, not from the cold, but from the weight of inevitability pressing on his chest. His internal monologue flickered with dry humor, the only shield against the encroaching dread. If fate's a joke, it's one hell of a cosmic one, and I'm the punchline. But hey, at least I'm not boring. Later that night, at a cramped diner, bathed in the neon glow of flickering signs, Detective Reed slid into the booth opposite Max and Lila. His rumpled trench coat was damp from the rain, and the ever-present cigarette smoldered between his fingers. The detective's eyes, sharp and tired, scanned the two comics with a mixture of suspicion and reluctant alliance. "I've been digging," Reed began, voice low and gravelly. "There's more to this curse than some urban legend. There's a cult, worshippers of this Jester figure. They believe in spreading chaos through deadly laughter." Lila exchanged a glance with Max, the absurdity of the situation settling like a fog. Great, a death cult with a sick sense of humor. Just what we needed. Reed cracked a rare dry smile. "Welcome to my world." The conversation wove through grim facts and speculative whispers. The clatter of plates and distant chatter of patrons, a stark contrast to the gravity of their discussion. Plans formed, alliances hardened, and amidst it all, Max's anxiety gave way to a flicker of resolve. He was no longer just a hapless victim. He was a player on a stage far larger and darker than any comedy club. The next encounter was less tangible but more haunting. In a narrow alley slick with rain, Max found himself face to face with a flickering apparition. The Jester's form shimmered like a mirage, his tattered costume flapping in an unfelt breeze, eyes glittering with a malevolent mirth that sent chills down Max's spine. "You're meddling in a game far beyond your wit, Max Tanner," the Jester intoned, voice like a twisted melody. "But even fate enjoys a good laugh." The words were both a threat and a riddle, leaving Max suspended in a liminal space between fear and fascination. The Jester was no mere villain. He was the embodiment of chaos, a trickster bound to the cruel joke of his own curse. When dawn broke, Max found himself alone on a rooftop overlooking the sprawling city. The fiery hues of morning clashed with the lingering shadows, mirroring the turmoil inside him. He lit a cigarette, inhaling deeply as the smoke curled upward, carrying away fragments of doubt. "Maybe this is it," he thought. "The punchline I didn't see coming. Fate's joke might be cruel, but that doesn't mean I have to laugh last. Comedy's about timing, and I'm learning to own the stage, no matter how twisted the script." Below, the city stirred awake, oblivious to the dark comedy unfolding in its midst. Max's gaze sharpened, resolve hardening like tempered steel. The festival awaited a crucible where jokes could kill, alliances would be tested, and fate itself might be outwitted. And if laughter was the weapon, then Max Tanner was ready to wield it, no matter what came next. The curtain was rising, and the final act was about to begin.